First came the laugh track, warm and familiar enough to make America trust the joke. But what if some of those punchlines were not just jokes at all? Behind game show smiles, sitcom kitchens, courtroom speeches, and harmless catchphrases, several beloved television men were quietly telling the truth in the only language prime time allowed. Tonight, listen again to the lines you thought you knew, because the funniest moments may have been the most revealing ones, hiding in plain sight. Raymond Burr. Raymond Burr may be the name that stops the most viewers first, because Perry Mason trained America to believe he was the man who could force truth into the open. From 1957 to 1966, Burr stood in that courtroom with calm authority, then returned to television in Ironside as another figure of discipline and control. On screen, his power came from evidence. Off screen, the record was far more carefully arranged. For years, public stories described wives, a son, and painful family losses. Later reporting questioned major parts of that biography, including family relationships that could not be verified. The gentler truth is that Burr lived behind a wall built for survival in old Hollywood. At the center of the life he rarely discussed was Robert Benavides, his longtime partner, whom he met through Perry Mason-era work and who remained part of his world for decades. That is why Burr belongs high on this list. His roles were built around truth, yet his private safety depended on what could not be said plainly. When Perry Mason rose to object, viewers heard a lawyer protecting his client. Hearing it now, older viewers may hear something more personal, a man protecting his own case file line by line, interview by interview. Burr passed away in 1993, leaving behind legendary performances and a more complicated human story. The courtroom always promised revelation. His life reminds us that, for many performers of that era, truth often had to wait until the final act. And that delay is exactly what makes his certainty feel so moving today for viewers. Robert Reed. Robert Reed may be the most heartbreaking chapter because millions trusted him as Mike Brady, the steady father who could quiet a crowded house with one serious look. On the Brady Bunch, his lines often sounded simple. Something was wrong. A family problem needed attention. The children had to learn a lesson. For young viewers, it was comfort television. For Reed, the word family carried a heavier echo. Born John Robert Reitz Jr. in Illinois in 1932, Reed was trained for serious theater and often pushed against the soft sweetness of the series. He wanted sharper writing, deeper motives, and more truth than the show usually allowed. Colleagues later spoke with sympathy about the strain he carried while living privately in a period when openness could threaten a career, a reputation, and the income that kept an actor working in prime time for years. Reed never publicly came out during his lifetime. After he passed away in 1992 at age 59, reports said the public cause was colon lymphoma, while his death certificate also listed HIV infection as a contributing condition. That later detail changed how many viewers understood the sadness behind the famous television father. This is not a story to sensationalize. It is a story about pressure, silence, and the cost of appearing perfectly reassuring for everyone else. When Mike Brady said this family had a problem, the sitcom meant chores, dates, or sibling arguments. Looking back, the line feels deeper. Robert Reed was asking for truth in a house that America thought was already perfect. For viewers who grew up with him, Paul Lynde. Paul Lynde belongs near the front because his comedy was not accidental. It was precision work. Hollywood squares made him look as if the punchlines simply fell out of his mouth, but his timing carried two messages at once. The studio audience heard a joke. Many people watching closely heard a man slipping coded truth past the gatekeepers. Born in Mount Vernon, Ohio in 1926, Lynde became famous as the center square on Hollywood squares, and also stole scenes as Uncle Arthur on Bewitched. When Peter Marshall asked whether a fairy or a pixie was usually better looking, Lynde answered with that unmistakable pause, that looks were not everything. It was funny because it was quick. It was unforgettable because the subtext was barely hidden. This is Tier A, intentional coding. Writers understood Lynde's persona, and Lynde understood exactly how far he could push a network audience. His famous game show answers about hockey teams, fruit, and masculine expectations landed because they were not random lines. They were little acts of camouflage, delivered with style. Off-camera, his sexuality was widely understood in Hollywood, though he could not discuss it plainly in the language public life would allow. That is what makes the laughter feel different now. In the 70s, viewers enjoyed the sparkle, the sneer, and the sudden sting. Today, the same lines sound braver. Paul Lynde was not only playing the center square, he was standing in the center of a culture that forced truth to arrive as comedy, one beautifully timed answer at a time for millions watching. And it still lands. Dick Sargent. Dick Sargent gives Bewitched a new emotional meaning because his most repeated television plea sounded almost too close to real life. As the second Darren Stevens from 1969 to 1972, he kept asking Samantha not to use her powers, not to draw attention, not to let the neighbors see what made her different. The laugh was about magic. The ache was about passing. Born Richard Stanford Cox in Carmel, California, in 1930, Sargent worked for years inside a Hollywood system that preferred actors to appear comfortably conventional. Public image mattered. Privacy could be managed. Rumors could be denied, softened, or redirected. In that world, a husband asking his wife to act normal became more than a sitcom habit. It became a mirror. This is Tier B, not written as an official coming-out message, but resonant in a way that now feels impossible to miss. Sargent later spoke about understanding the metaphor of Bewitched deeply. In 1991, on National Coming Out Day, he publicly came out in Los Angeles and used that moment to support young gay people who felt alone. He later described himself, with humility and humor, as a retroactive role model. When he and Elizabeth Montgomery appeared together at Pride, the old show suddenly seemed to glow differently. Samantha, you promised no longer sounds like a harmless scolding about magic. It sounds like the pressure placed on anyone told to hide their power, their difference, or their truth to keep the neighborhood comfortable. And for viewers over 60, it may turn a familiar rerun into a surprisingly tender memory worth revisiting now. Jim Nabors. Jim Nabors earns a high place because almost every American television viewer of a certain age remembers the warmth before they remember the irony. As Gomer Pyle on The Andy Griffith Show and then Gomer Pyle, USMC, he turned innocence into a kind of music. Golly, Shazam, and especially surprise, surprise, surprise were not sharp lines. They were open-hearted lines. Born in Sylacauga, Alabama in 1930, Nabors created a character so gentle that audiences felt safe around him. Gomer could be naive, but never cruel. He could be amazed, but never bitter. That sweetness made the later public chapter of Nabors' life feel especially meaningful. Inside entertainment circles, his private life was not treated as a total mystery. For much of the wider audience, however, it remained outside the official story. Then, in 2013, at age 82, Nabors confirmed that he had married Stan Cadwallader in Seattle after 38 years together. He explained that they had not had the same legal protections as other couples and wanted to make their commitment solid. This is Tier C, but softened by honesty late in life. The catchphrase was written for Gomer's cheerful astonishment. history gave it a second echo. Surprise, surprise, surprise became less about Nabors being surprising and more about the public discovering what love can look like when it has waited patiently for recognition. For longtime fans, his story is not scandalous. It is tender. The same voice that once made America smile also reminds us that dignity can arrive quietly even after decades spent just outside the frame of public conversation for many years. Charles Nelson Reilly. Charles Nelson Reilly did not wait for anyone else to hide the joke. He designed it, exaggerated it, and then dared America to laugh with him. On Match Game, he could suddenly drop his voice, become Chuck, and announce a ridiculous version of tough masculinity. The panel laughed because the performance was transparent. Reilly knew it, and so did everyone watching. Born in the South Bronx in 1931, Reilly had already won a Tony Award before television made him a familiar guest in living rooms across the country. Earlier in his career, an NBC executive reportedly told him that gay performers were not welcome on television. Reilly's answer was not a speech. It was presence. He appeared again and again, making the old warning look smaller every time. This is Tier A in its cleanest form, self-fashioned camp as armor. The Chuck routine was not merely a gag about being masculine. It exposed masculinity as a costume, something that could be put on, inflated, mocked, and removed. That is why the bit still feels smarter than a simple panel show laugh. Later, Reilly said he had never purposely hidden being gay from anyone. His longtime partner, Patrick Hughes III, shared his life after they met through game show work. So when Reilly boomed, "I'm Chuck, very butch," America heard parody. We can now hear something more layered. A brilliant performer measuring the distance between the man television expected and the man already sitting comfortably in the chair. That confidence, more than the joke itself, is what keeps the clip alive today for older viewers now. Hayden Rorke. Hayden Rorke may seem quieter than the others, but that is exactly why his chapter works. On I Dream of Jeannie, he played Dr. Alfred Bellows, the NASA psychiatrist forever convinced that something strange was happening around Major Nelson. Week after week, Bellows circled the truth, gathered clues, raised his eyebrows, and still missed the exact explanation. Rorke was born William Henry Rorke in Brooklyn in 1910 and brought decades of stage and screencraft to the role. Before Jeannie began in 1965, he had already built the kind of dependable career television loved: polished, disciplined, and precise. Off-screen, according to later accounts from Barbara Eden and others, he shared a long private life with director Eustace Addis. He did not make a public declaration during his lifetime, so the respectful wording matters here. People close to him knew more than the general audience was told. This is Tier B. The writers were not turning Dr. Bellows into a hidden confession, but the pattern now feels striking. He played a man obsessed with exposing someone else's secret while keeping his own life outside the frame with remarkable grace. That is what gives the line new texture. "I am convinced something very strange is going on," once meant flying furniture, disappearing genies, and sitcom confusion. Today, it can also sound like a sly reflection of old Hollywood itself. Everyone sensed something, almost no one said it plainly, and dignity depended on how carefully the truth stayed just off camera. For that reason, Bellows may be funnier now than ever to viewers who remember him fondly. The laugh track made these lives sound simple, but every rerun now carries another question. Which line was only a joke, and which one was a careful confession? Tell us in the comments which story moved you most and where you first watched these shows. If you value respectful, untold television history, subscribe, tap the bell, and join us for the next hidden chapter from America's own living room past.